Hello, and welcome to another episode of My Dog Will Eat My Face. He is actually incidentally right next to me right now as I speak, so I will apologize in advance if you hear any unusual puppy activities in the background. Things such as squeaking of toys or woofing at nothing. I promise I'm not the one doing it and just going completely mad. But that's exactly what a mad person would say, isn't it? Anyway, moving right along. As of last week, I was very much hung out to dry, to leave it lightly. I was facing a catastrophic, good Lord, catastrophic, it's okay, I'll edit that out later. A catastrophic medical event wherein I would lose all of my necessary medications by the end of the day, Friday of last week. Actually, they'd all end by the end of the day, but some would end on the very beginning of the day, some midday, and some end of day. So it took all day to be completely basically kaput with what I have. And I had at that point earlier in the week had scheduled a conversation with my former provider who had suggested to my cardiologist that I reapply. And if you did hear that last episode, I came to a really lousy conclusion that what I decide in this case just doesn't matter. How I choose to approach it, by being nice or nasty, on which strategy I wish to pursue, is going to be doomed to failure no matter what. And the reason, if you recall why I said that, was because of the time limit. And that is, when dealing with multiplayer strategies, if there is a known specific time limit, it can generally result in both sides or all sides losing, regardless of how their strategies performed in the end. Because of that time limit, everyone will be structured to defect against one another for the maximum amount of points, but they'll be doing it at the same time. So they would get 0 points, but then they would do it again and again and again in all these personalities because of that very first time limit issue. Because on that very last turn, why not defect? Why not try to get the most possible? There's no ramification. They can't return the favor, so to speak, back to you. So knowing that there's, say, a 200 turn time limit between two players means that they're both going to throw caution to the wind most likely, on the 199th turn. But then so too will then perhaps another personality, or the very same ones, then proceed to throw everything in caution to the wind and defect on turn 198, then 197, and so on until the very second turn. And it just ends with the lowest possible score, and basically everything self-destructs. And I gave some examples of this, some in diplomatic and military history, which I'm sure bored all of you to tears. But also, the best visualization I can use to describe this is, think of every disaster movie where the world is ending and it's approaching. People are rioting, the military's on the street trying to enforce militia law, and martial law, I should say, and people are robbing and looting and out to cut throats, basically, to get everything they could, since nothing matters anymore. So visualize that in any disaster movie where you've seen something like that. And that's pretty much the same thing I'm talking about. Once you insert this time limit, both sides lose. All the players lose. And of course, I was referring to this then to the Medicare hospice service that currently exists in these United States. Just through the fact that there is a time limit embedded within the federal guidelines for hospice care. That is an expected expiration date and then expected consequent renewals after that. If there's only a continued decline, but even if they're still level at a terrible state, you lose coverage. That's how the current health system under hospice care is structured in the grand US of A. You could decline all the way down to, I don't know, being in just horrific pain, or limbs for falling off, or something just catastrophic. But you just don't die. Because that's really the only next step. You get right up to that point, let's say, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, thank God, this nightmare of pain and suffering is going to end. And then it doesn't. The very last thing just sits there, and your stupid body still clings to life and staggers along. And because of that, for over a course of a number of months that is in the federal system, you no longer qualify for hospice. Even the only way to continue to qualify in hospice is literally just dropping dead. There's nothing more that could go wrong. At this point, you're just a brain in a vat. But you're not dead. So you're just sitting there and you lose your coverage. To get the same coverage, you just have to have private insurance or good old-fashioned Medicare. And you get it to be nearly impossible to get the appropriate care you need to maintain any quality of life. And it's that time limit that's embedded within the whole system and how it's structured. There's multiple time limits. There's multiple triggers that would cause this, actually. All based upon time limits. And because of that, I concluded in the last broadcast that it's doomed to fail. It doesn't matter what strategy I choose going forward. Well, today I'm going to report on how it went, and was I right? Was my prediction correct? That truly didn't matter. Because for me, the results were absolutely spooky to some extent. And let me start out, before getting ahead of myself, with explaining to you what happened and telling you why I say that. So, what happened when I did that meeting on Tuesday to discuss returning to my hospice caregiver with the new information we had from my cardiologist, which was very depressing, to put it mildly, from one perspective, because the very first words were just, I was still in a terminal state of heart failure, and it is clearly getting worse. However, he also said in his report that because this is the first case in recorded human history of a human being born with this congenital whoopsie, that is a missing right pulmonary artery, and to then receive a completely synthetic shunt in place of it, because I was so small they could not graft an artery, which was the usual procedure. So, because of that being this first recorded case, there's truly no way they could accurately predict my life expectancy. It could be 6 minutes. It could be 6 years. But my doctor made it very clear that I was indeed in a terminal downward spiral with no options for treatment. That's the depressing part. And I, though, did think because of that clear language and the way he described it, I would absolutely qualify to continue my hospice services, irrespective of the federal guidelines, because, as I just said, it was the first recorded case in human history. We're writing the prognosis as we go. There is no precedent before to estimate that. I'll be the one to tell the future how to predict that and prognosticate that more specifically. And the call sounded out rather cordial. They sent a admissions nurse, so I was thinking, cool. Then they wanted to do a call-in with their medical director. I got a little nervous about that, but I could see a medical director wanting to meet a new patient no matter what. So I was like, okay. My family joined the call too. Some of my family that's been supporting me to listen in and contribute where they could. And it started out fairly cordial, and I was honest in expressing how hard the last 2 weeks were with me. And to me, it is just ridiculous for me to fight for the appropriate care I need just to be able to have some quality of life in whatever life expectancy I may yet have. I said very clearly multiple times that is my goal. Well, I'll cut to the chase. I was right in stating my strategy did not matter in this situation. Because after all that, all of the Chinese fire drill that we did, go through the motions to get the additional objective data this medical director wanted, clearly stating then that I am in a terminal state, we were very surprised still that they would go to this great length. And also, at some point, when they finally wrap up, to tell me to just go away. We had already been in the phone call for about 1 hour. So this whole thing was just a very elaborate ruse, and I don't understand their motivation in that. They could have sent an email, and I would have gotten it taken care of and known that I could go elsewhere with my life within 5 minutes. But they did this whole thing, building up our hope and making us anxious and causing further mental anguish, not with just me, but with my family members, trying to do this satisfactorily to get the appropriate care that we all agree I need. At the end of it, I was turned down. And the personality strategy that I chose in my game strategy theory podcast was tit for tat, because that was the one that won out above all other personality types where it was possible to win. And I'm just saying that again because when there's a time limit, it pretty much just makes it so that in the long run, nobody wins. Very interesting. So, yes, I adopted the tit-for-tat personality. I stated very clearly what my expectations were and what I needed, and I did. I even said, I need a doctor, you or someone else, to take the chance to provide me with the necessary services and medical care that I need to maintain my quality of life before I expire. That's it. So that was a very clear statement of what I wanted, which was the step 2. Of that strategy. Step 1, more or less, was just be friendly at first. At that point, there's no reason to come out with hate. Don't hold a grudge. And I truly was still rather bearing a grudge I had for her on that call, but I decided not to. What's the word? Lament on that, because that just doesn't do anyone any good either. But then she clearly stated, I think you need to find another hospice service. So, in my eloquent way, I had some very choice words for her, disconnected the call, and threw out the admissions nurse, who had no reason even to come to my home, because she certainly knew what this outcome was going to be before she got there. And just basically had to throw her out of my house. And I guess, and the strategy I chose, that is adhering to that tit-for-tat strategy, where if I am defected against, or in other words, harmed by someone, as I was, take immediate and drastic action. You don't see how bad it gets for, and no, you make immediate or take immediate action and severe action. It doesn't have to be grossly out of proportion. Don't let it confuse you that. It's got to be action that, I guess, more or less makes it clear to the other party, you are taking action. You are unhappy with them right now. And then the final step is don't hold a grudge. Right? So, I say I'm right, though, because when you throw in the time limit with this whole federal system of guidelines, it doesn't matter what I pick. In that example, everyone will fail because they are adhering to these strict guidelines. When they're guidelines, they're not as strict as they may seem. Especially considering I'm the first known case of this in human history. It doesn't seem the slightest bit of containing any humility to just watch me die because of these time limits. Because I'm the first case and we don't know how it's going to happen and when. So, yeah, the good news was I was right. Dead right. No pun intended. And I was less than elegant, but I was very clear that I was angry and I felt harmed by them. And they did. They truly did. There's no reason to drag this kind of thing on. There's no reason to say a false hope to my cardiologist and to even schedule a call and have an admissions nurse come over to visit my place. None of that was necessary when the decision was already well beforehand that the medical director had made this decision already long before she even ever met me. That's what I think happened. And the more I consider it, the more strongly I think that that is exactly what happened. She was just looking at the numbers and nothing else. So yeah, again, that was the good news. The bad news, though, is I was now at that point left, hanging out there, off all my medications, all of them, and had no way to get them back within any short order, meaning it could spell a catastrophic problem where I'd very well may end up in the emergency room. So, by the end of the day Tuesday last week, that's exactly where I was. So, I was proven completely correct with my final conclusion in my last podcast. And yeah, I now had to face no medical help or no medication whatsoever. I started to apply to other hospices. I got through to maybe 3 or 4 of them. One I just didn't get a response from. 2 said no, citing the same Medicare guidelines, hospice guidelines. But the final one who I met just this last Friday was something different. We actually broke the ice a little bit because I saw her last name was Polish. And some of my mom's family are the South Russian Cossacks that also migrated in some time period to southern Poland. But there's still a minority in southern Russia, the Cossacks, and they were if you don't know what they are, they were the fierce of the fiercest cavalrymen and horsemen that were used by the Tsar to enforce his rule or battle other countries. They're essentially mercenaries. And their top command in the Tsar's army actually ended up being Cossacks. But for all that reason, they were heavily oppressed when the Bolsheviks came to power. They didn't want anything to do with people who once worked for the Cossack or for the Tsar. And so the 1917 revolution is what pushed them out. And, they fled because they were being killed by Stalin. And that's how that half of my family came to this country. But, yeah, anyway, I saw that she had a Polish name. The medical director had a Polish name, and I told her that story as well, so we kind of bonded over that. And I then, as we walked to where we could sit to discuss things, I walked to a painting I wanted to show her, which is a painting of the Siege of Vienna. I showed it to her, though, and said, "Do you know what this is a depiction of?" She's looking at it. She's not really sure. At one point, she goes, "Is that a camel?" I'm like, "Yep, very well could be a camel, yeah." After a while, she's like, I give up. What is this?" And then I said, "Well, look on the other side of the painting, far away from the camel. Look at their flags that their armies are holding." She goes, "Oh, it's the Polish flag. Bingo." This is a real event. It's a painting depicting a real event. Obviously, it's not like photorealistic or anything. But essentially, the Ottoman Empire was just rolling through the Balkans and into Europe, just crumbling all of these partitioned fiefdoms and Christian kingdoms, and laid siege eventually to the city of Vienna in Austria. Well, the Pope at this time gave some sort of holy decree to all Christian states to battle back the Muslim Ottomans. Because, well, wherever the Ottomans went, everyone had to convert to Islam for the most part, or pay a hefty tax for not being Muslim. Things like that. It's not good for you, in other words, if you're a Christian in the Ottoman Empire. And if Vienna fell, they knew that Europe was pretty much at that point wide open to just an Ottoman onslaught, just kingdom after kingdom, one by one, until all of Western civilization was just gone. And part of a larger caliphate under the Ottomans. So the Holy Roman Empire, in, quote unquote, Holy Roman Empire, gave a similar order, because the Pope did, to shore up the Christian fighters in this Ottoman onslaught. And it was the King of Poland, Jan Sobieski, who took it upon himself to sweep in and relieve the besieged city of Vienna. Last minute, it was all but doomed. It was on its last thread. It was about to fall. And then suddenly, out of the woods or something, over the hills, whatever, there appears the Polish army descending onto the camped out Ottoman army surrounding Vienna. And they came in with their very fierce and renowned winged hussars, which were their cavalry unit. They were called that because they basically, just as a scary looking gimmick, I think, attached these huge black wings kind of on their back. So when they came in on horseback, you would see these black wings flopping or waving in the air behind them. And they were actually a very elite force. They were a very feared force for real reasons, not just the wings. Anyway, so we really owe it to the Poles to have any Western civilization at all. More than likely, at least. It certainly wouldn't be the same it is today. It changed history forever. But I showed her that painting and said I got it as kind of a tribute to my mom, because she was the same descendancy as this medical director, as I said. And she always would say these stupid Polish jokes, self-deprecating things. And, I'm all about self-deprecating humor, obviously. But there were times when I sincerely thought, I started to really suspect, I should say, that she meant it. She really thought she was dumb. And she never was. And so I educate her on that battle, the siege of Vienna, and how it was the Polish king that basically saved all of Europe. And she never heard that story before. She's college educated, but gosh, how many people know of that? Unless you grew up there, or I don't know, have a history degree, and I don't know. And I love history, and I have been there. Because I also said, hey, do you see that real tall black church in the middle of the city? She's like, yeah, I've been in that building. That's actually exactly how it does look. She's like, really? Yeah, that's Stephendom, St. Stephen's Cathedral. And it's still standing today in Vienna. You can go there and visit it. Anyway, so that was a good icebreaker, needless to say. Pardon me. And we started to talk, and she said very openly to me, I was very open and honest with her with these time limits being an issue because I'm just the first case. And she said, right. And she said, yes, the federal guidelines say that, but I have a totally different conclusion than these other doctors have had that you've dealt with recently. You are clearly in a terminal state of heart failure, a near terminal state in kidney failure. Irrespective of these time-limiting guidelines, it would be against my Hippocratic oath to at least not provide you the services that you need as someone who is dying. And she said she would be willing to defend that position. And it was music to my ears, folks. Sort of the same thing I've been saying all along. And she said, though, I'll tell you point blank, might come up again because of these stupid time limits. We might be having an issue. But if it happens, we'll deal with it then. But I'm going to take you on right now. Basically, as of that weekend then, I got my medications back, and now I am back in full hospice care again, receiving the care I need, as well as the medications I need so I don't drown in my own fluids. So, it came to a happy ending. I know that doesn't sound right, but I'm not talking about that other happy ending. In the long run, it worked out, which is interesting because I only just now realized, as I said that was precisely one of the main points. The first points of that game theory that I talked about some time ago. And that is that it's the opposite of the old saying. The reality, that is the opposite of the old saying that the good guy never wins. Au contraire, the good guys generally and demonstrably win over the nasty guys, is what they call them, but the bad guys, whatever you want to call them. It worked out. So I didn't even realize that until now. That is also predicted yet still by the very first finding of that study. That for the most part, the good guys come in first. And then in the long run, they come in first. And this particular strategy as well the tit for tat, exceedingly comes out way ahead with every other personality, all the other nice personalities too. So I also incidentally started to use the same strategy again when I met this doctor. I approached her very kindly. I was very nice to her. Obviously, we bonded a little bit over some mutual heritage. And I stated very clearly what I need. And she very clearly stated to me what she thinks. She can't promise the moon. We might have issues later, but we'll deal with it when and if we get to it. Very open communication, very straightforward between the two of us. So, that being said, maybe, truly, in the long run, this will follow the same course as predicted in that 1980 study. How interesting is that? I think I'm just going to recommend that to everybody. At the very least, being the nice one in the long run finishes first. But if they give me any more of their ear as to what I mean, I'll explain the tit for tat strategy. Because it's kind of blowing my socks off how much it is emulating exactly what I learned about prior to these events, and that was discovered way back in the 1980s. So, you can't get much more of a testimonial than that. So there, I recommend it to everybody. Nice in the long run, finishes first. And I highly recommend you use the tit for tat personality as described in my last episode. Well, as my voice is seemingly going out on me, I think that's my cue to shut up. But it's definitely a good place to end it. Obviously, things can still go pear-shaped. And it is also very awkward to hear myself say, yay, I got approved again for hospice care. Hooray, I'm dying. Woohoo! Wait a minute. It's kind of awkward. But what I am really happy about is I'm actually going to get the care I need and I want to maintain my quality of life as much as possible for as long as possible. So yeah, I am actually celebrating that, not celebrating the fact that I'm in a terminal heart failure. I'm just reserved to that. It is what it is. Just came with the package of being born, unfortunately. So, things could still go sideways, but right now, for the time being, they've turned around. And hopefully, I don't get any other new surprises in the future. So, once again, I highly recommend trying the tit-for-tat strategy as outlined in the previous episode. I can't remember what episode number it is off the top of my head. I'd have to go look it up. But anyway, last episode about game theory, where it talks about basically the best strategies to compete and to win for what you want in life. And I could definitely show in a very small example between these two episodes that it's apparently still true and tried. So if you don't do it already, give it a shot. You might be pleasantly surprised. And of course, above all, thank you so much for listening to my podcast and giving me something to sound off on. Because it actually does help me tremendously personally to manage my thoughts, my options, and my feelings. It's really just like journaling to me. But if you happen to gain something from it as well, that's just the gravy on the potatoes. So, I hope to speak to you in the near future, next week. But for now, I must say, Auf Wiedersehen.